Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Statue of Zeus at Olympia. At one point, there was nothing bigger or better in the ancient world than the Statue of Zeus at Olympia. It was the first, in chronological order, of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Master sculptor Phidias was behind the megalithic monument to Zeus. It was truly a sight to behold, even larger than the statue of Athena at the Parthenon. Pilgrims from all across the Mediterranean traveled to Athens just to see the massive statue of Zeus, Lord of all gods of Olympus. The statue was built over 40 feet high, depicting Zeus seated on his heavenly throne. Construction started around 466 BC, and it was finished about 430 BC. It had a wooden core with gold and ivory covering its outer layer. Zeus's skin was pale ivory, and everything else, like his beard and his robes, were made from hammered sheets of gold. There was also a lot of silver, copper, and glass that would make up the finer details of the god's wardrobe. And of course, he was also encrusted with jewels. The finishing touch was that the statue was built in front of a shallow pool of pure olive oil, reflecting the statue to give it an almost otherworldly appearance. It is interesting to note that the sculptor Phidias made Zeus seem like an old fatherly figure with his beard and long hair. Centuries later, you could see traces of this tradition in Christian depictions of the Christ Pantocrator. Do you see any similarities? The monument was built inside the sanctuary of Olympia, a great temple that was completed 30 years earlier. But just so you know, if you do go to Olympia, the statue of Zeus is not going to be there. I learned that the hard way. They'll tell you all about the ancient place and how beautiful it was and how big it was, but when you look around, there's absolutely nothing there except a pile of rubble. So you have to have a very good imagination. For people living during this time, the statue of Zeus was more than just a statue. It was the physical representation of their god on Earth. In historical works, it was called the god instead of just the statue. In those days, sculptures of gods were believed to connect the world of gods with our world. There were even stories that when the artist Phidias finished the statue, he asked Zeus if he liked it, and thunder boomed from the sky and lightning opened a hole in the ground, which was seen as a sign that Zeus approved. There is a rumor that the crazy Roman Emperor Caligula tried to steal the statue for Rome 400 years after it was built. He failed, but about 600 years later, the statue was removed and transported to Constantinople by Emperor Constantine I. What happened to it next is a mystery. Some think it was destroyed by an earthquake, while other historians say it was most likely burned in a fire around 475 AD. The temple at Olympia where the statue was housed was severely damaged by earthquakes, fires, and invasions, and it's believed that the statue was likely destroyed or melted down for its valuable materials, such as the gold and the ivory. Today, only descriptions and drawings of the statue remain, and it is considered one of the greatest losses of ancient art and architecture. Number 9. The Colossus of Rhodes. The Colossus of Rhodes was one of the shortest living wonders of the ancient world. It stood for only 54 years before it was destroyed, but for half a century, the Colossus was one of the greatest monuments on the planet. It was 108 feet of solid bronze, shaped into the form of a man, towering over the Greek city of Rhodes. It was built to commemorate Rhodes' triumph over its enemies. The history of the Colossus takes us back to 305 BC. Rhodes was a thriving trading port on the small Greek island of the same name. Rhodes was so prosperous that the successor of Alexander the Great, Antigonus I, who had just taken over Macedonia, sent his son to destroy the city. The man's son, Demetrius I, laid siege to the city, but after 12 months, he was forced to abandon his efforts. To celebrate their survival, Rhodes created a massive statue of everyone's favorite sun god Helios. The citizens paid for the great monument by selling off the military materials left behind by the failed invasion force. Pretty clever, right? The Colossus was built by a famous sculptor named Lysippus. The sculptor had just finished building a massive statue of Zeus and began working on the Colossus around 292 BC. Construction on the monument went on for a full 12 years. To start, a base of white marble was placed at the entrance to the city's bay. Then a 108-foot-tall iron skeleton was built and covered in thick iron plates. The statue was finally finished in the year 280 BC. But in 226 BC, a devastating earthquake caused the Colossus to snap at the knees and collapse. So, unfortunately, absolutely no trace of the Colossus remains today. And now for number 8, but first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Nivolnik72 and Paula Burnett for supporting this channel. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. And let me know what your favorite wonder of the ancient world was. Number 8. The Lighthouse of Alexandria. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was a historical mystery until its remains were discovered by French archaeologists in 1994. Up until that point, nobody had even known where the lighthouse originally stood. The giant structure was built between 280 and 247 BC at the northern edge of Egypt, at the bay leading into the city of Alexandria. It was commissioned by Ptolemy I, the very man who stayed behind to rule Egypt after Alexander the Great passed away. Ptolemy would die before the lighthouse was finished, but his successor was around to see its light turn on. The tower was truly enormous, shorter only than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It remained one of the tallest structures on Earth for centuries, estimated at a whopping 330 feet high. The lighthouse had an ever-burning fire at its top, with a polished mirror sending its light streaking out across the water. As with so many great structures in the Mediterranean, the Lighthouse of Alexandria was destroyed by an earthquake. 3 earthquakes, to be exact, struck between 956 and 1323 AD, with the final tremor bringing the tower down once and for all. Its stones were then picked up and repurposed during the construction of the citadel of Kate Bay, which, unlike the lighthouse, still stands today. Number 7. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. If ancient historians are to be believed, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon were the most luxurious private gardens in the whole world. According to Josephus, the long-dead historian who lived between 37 and 100 AD, the Hanging Gardens were vast. He described them as being housed within the palace of King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon. This legendary garden may have been located in the ancient city of Babylon, which was situated on the eastern bank of the Euphrates River, in what is now modern-day Iraq. The gardens were shielded by high walls which were supported by stone pillars, and they were rich with a wide variety of trees, flowers, and other lush plants. King Nebuchadnezzar supposedly had the gardens commissioned to make his queen happy, as she was a big nature lover and wanted a nice place to relax at the palace. Nobody knows exactly what was planted in the gardens, but we do have a pretty good idea. Historical accounts describe extensive fruit orchards bearing almonds, olives, pears, pomegranates, and figs. There would have been all the fruits and vegetables a person could possibly want. All of these plants were part of a hanging oasis fed by a system of aqueducts and canals. The garden was also suspended about 75 feet above the desert city of Babylon, making it a truly magical sight to behold. The biggest issue is that nobody has ever been able to confirm that the Hanging Gardens of Babylon ever truly existed. Despite scientists searching for the location for decades, nobody has ever found physical evidence of the garden. While some say the gardens were part of a palace in Babylon, others say they may have been located in the Assyrian capital of Nineveh, or in the city of Susa, which was located in what is now modern-day Iran. Whatever the case, computer models based on historical descriptions of people who wrote about the gardens show that this place wasn't just beautiful, but also an incredible feat of engineering. What do you think? Were the Hanging Gardens of Babylon simply a myth? Or were they real and have just been lost to time? Let me know what you think in the comments. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. Number 6. The Mausoleum at Helicarnassus. The Mausoleum at Helicarnassus was once one of the largest and most impressive tombs on the planet. After all, it was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The mausoleum was built in 350 BC for Mausolus, the ruler of Caria, which was a semi-independent Persian nation in southwest Turkey, with Helicarnassus as its capital. It was here where the famous historian Herodotus was born in the 5th century BC. Mausoleum was loved for bringing a new era of prosperity to the city, adding several new temples and developing coastal cities. He was also responsible for establishing better trading routes throughout the Mediterranean. When he died, his mausoleum needed to be grand in order to commemorate all that he'd done, and so an immense marble structure decorated with sculptures was built, shining pure white against the hot sun. It was such a striking monument that people traveled from all around just to gaze at it and give their respects to the deceased ruler. Pliny the Elder, the Roman historian from the 1st century AD, described the mausoleum as being 440 feet long and crowned by an amazing statue of a 4-horse chariot. Modern excavations in the ruins of Helicarnassus have shown that Pliny's measurements weren't that far off. Archaeologists identified the ruins of the columns that once held the mausoleum's roof up, and a surviving fragment from one of the chariot wheels that had adorned the structure. As for what happened to the mausoleum, it collapsed around the 13th century due to natural causes. Then, most of its marble was taken away to help build the walls of the Bodrum Castle. Number 5. The Great Pyramid of Giza. We all know what the Great Pyramid of Giza looks like now, but not everyone is familiar with what it looked like immediately after its construction. For centuries after it was built, the Great Pyramid of Giza looked like a giant white triangle topped off with a pointy gold capstone. It didn't even resemble the brown ruin it is today, with its visible and crumbling square blocks. Assistant Professor Mohamed Megahed from the Czech Institute of Egyptology in Prague says the pyramid was once encased in white limestone. This limestone casing would have given the pyramid a smooth layer, making it appear polished so that it shined brightly under the fierce Egyptian sun. Builders apparently used around 6 million tons of limestone to complete the impressive pyramid. There are rumors that the large gold capstone at the top was able to conduct electricity, which may or may not have been true. Despite what the conspiracy theories may have you believe, all archaeological evidence says the pyramid was commissioned for Pharaoh Khufu after his death in 2528 BC. It was used as a tomb for the mighty pharaoh, but about 1,000 years later, under the reign of King Tutankhamun, the shiny white facade of the pyramid began to be stripped. The pillaging continued until the 12th century AD, when all the bright white limestone was gone and the gold capstone was stolen, leaving the pyramids drab and brown. Number 4. The Temple of Artemis. Ephesus was the biggest city in Asia Minor about 2,500 years ago. It was a Greek port known throughout the Mediterranean for being a city of magic. In 550 BC, King Croesus built the megalithic Temple of Artemis, one of the lesser-known wonders of the ancient world. It looked just like any other Greek temple, only it was positively massive. It was built using over 100 marble columns, each one decorated in sculptural reliefs. The structure was about 350 feet long and 180 feet wide, complete with statues of Amazon warriors and lion heads everywhere. And the whole thing was completed for Artemis, the Greek goddess of the hunt, a deity that's largely based on the ancient earth goddess Cybele. The temple was likely a place of brutal ritual sacrifice. Worshippers would have brought their bulls here in order to slaughter them on behalf of the goddess, letting their blood stain the floor. Unlike most ancient wonders that were destroyed by earthquakes or war, the Temple of Artemis was annihilated by a pyromaniac. A lunatic named Herostratus burned the temple to the ground on July 21st, 356 BC. He did it because he wanted to achieve infamy, which worked out for him in the end since we are still talking about him 2,300 years later. Number 3. Hagia Sophia. There have been a lot of contenders for the 8th wonder of the ancient world. One of them is the Hagia Sophia, an architectural wonder that can be found in modern Istanbul. It was built as a Christian basilica over 1,500 years ago. It was Emperor Constantine of the Byzantine Empire who commissioned the Hagia Sophia in 360 AD. The original structure was modest, with a plain wooden roof and no frills, but then it burned to the ground in 404 AD during riots in Constantinople. The Hagia Sophia was then rebuilt by Emperor Theodosius II, but it was burned down again a century later and was fully demolished in 532 AD. The third and final Hagia Sophia, the one that's still standing, was built entirely from scratch and completed in 537 AD. It remained an important place for Christian worship up until the Crusades. Constantinople was captured by Mehmed the Conqueror in 1453, who renamed the city Istanbul. The Hagia Sophia was turned from a Christian place of worship into a mosque. These days, it's still an important place for both Christians and Muslims. It was briefly a museum, but more recently it was turned back into a mosque. Number 2. Sigiriya. Sigiriya has been declared by none other than UNESCO itself as the 8th wonder of the world. This majestic place can be found in Sri Lanka in the Matale district. It's an ancient rock fortress with a palace built on the top of what is essentially a giant boulder. Locals call the place Lion's Rock, partly because the only way into the ancient fortress is through a giant lion's mouth constructed of brick and plaster. Sigiriya isn't as ancient as the original wonders, though, since it was built around 477 AD by King Kashyapa I. People had already been living on the rock since the 3rd century, but it didn't gain great fame until the king decided to build his capital there. Kashyapa had recently secured his throne by assassinating his father and kicking his brother out of the kingdom. But the king was afraid his brother would come back with a force and challenge him. And so he hid in his newly completed palace way up on Lion's Rock. His cowardice proved to be his downfall, however, as he was killed and his palace was largely destroyed. Sigiriya was then used as a monastery for Buddhists for the next 1,000 years, until being entirely abandoned. Number 1. Petra. Petra truly deserves a spot on the list of ancient world wonders, but the only list it's currently on is the new 7 wonders of the world. The lost city was only discovered in 1812, and its history goes back over 2,000 years. Petra was established around 312 BC, making it one of the oldest functioning metropolises in the region. It was the capital of the Nabatean kingdom, a trading hub where merchants using the Silk Road rested on their way through the Middle Eastern deserts. The original constructors of Petra, a city carved into the side of massive cliff walls, migrated out of Arabia and into Jordan around the 6th century BC. However, Petra isn't just a single monument like you see in photographs. The city is home to roughly 800 tombs, most of which can be found inside a mausoleum known as the Treasury. Petra had an estimated 30,000 people living in its cave-like dwellings before the birth of Jesus Christ in the 1st century AD. Even though the city was in the desert, people survived thanks to a complex water channel bringing fresh water from far away and storing it for use in the dry months. Unfortunately, the Nabateans were usurped by the Romans around 106 BC. Then the Romans themselves abandoned the desert outpost about 200 years later. For the next 2,000 years, Petra was home to nomadic tribes of goat herders. Thanks for watching! What do you think the 8th wonder of the world should be? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to hit that subscribe button and come back soon. See you later! Bye!